Today, navies are a key part of any country's defense. You have destroyers, aircraft carriers, submarines, all of it made from cutting-edge technology. But centuries ago, navies looked very different. Ships were not made of metal, they were carved from wood. And since those times, India has been sailing the seas. Our maritime history dates back to 3000 BC. The Indus Valley civilization had contacts with Mesopotamia. The biggest example is Lothal. It is a historical site located in the state of Gujarat. A dry dock has been discovered at Lothal. Then you have the Cholas, one of the longest ruling dynasties in southern India. They reigned from the 9th to the 13th centuries. The Cholas had one of the strongest navies at the time. They sailed the Ganges. They sent expeditions to present-day Indonesia and also diplomatic missions to China. My point is, India is no stranger to the seas, and there's a reason for that. The long coastline. India is what you call a peninsula. It is surrounded by ocean on three sides. Total length, more than 7,500 kilometers. That is how long India's coastline is, 7,500 kilometers, which means you need a strong maritime defense. Since independence, the Indian Navy has come a long way. INS Vikrant symbolizes that growth. It shows the gradual evolution of India's defense, from a buyer to a producer. But how does India's Navy compare with the rest of the world? Let's take a closer look. First, aircraft carriers. The United States has 11 of them. They're all deployed all over the world, in the Pacific, in the Atlantic, in the Persian Gulf, anywhere the US wants to project hard power. China has 3 carriers. The latest one was commissioned earlier this year. India, Britain and Italy have 2 carriers. France, Russia and Spain have 1. Next is submarines. China leads this list with 79. Russia is second with 70. The US is 68, North Korea 35, Iran 19 and India 17. Finally, total fleet strength. China has around 777 vessels. Russia has 605. The US has 484. Where does India slot in? At number 8 with 295 vessels. I know that gap seems daunting. China's fleet is more than double India's. But let me tell you an important rule of maritime power. Largest does not mean the most powerful. Quality is way more important than quantity, and I'll tell you why. China has 777 ships in its fleet, but not all of them are lethal destroyers or warships. Some of them are hovercraft. And if war breaks out, they won't be of much use. The fact is, naval warfare has changed dramatically over time. The ships, the weapons, the strategies, all of it has changed. But do you know what hasn't? The theory of maritime dominance. We call it command of the sea. She who rules the oceans rules the world. Take any superpower of modern times, Imperial Britain. It dominated the sea for nearly 2 centuries. The United States, it's still dominating the seas after almost 70 years. The question is why? Why is a strong navy so important to dominate the world? For 2 broad reasons. Number 1, financial control. Almost 90% of global trade is done by sea. It is transported in massive cargo ships and containers. If you control the seas, you control that trade. You can choke your enemy's economy. You could cut off their imports. And that's one reason why naval dominance is so important. Reason number 2 is access. Almost 2/3 of the earth is covered by oceans. To cover this territory, you need a navy. It can be used to transport soldiers, to transport firepower, to send supplies to war zones. And I can give you multiple examples. During World War II, American soldiers had to be deployed in Europe and North Africa. How do you think they crossed the Atlantic? In ships. The US Navy was so overstretched that even cruise ships were called in. Now this rationale applies to India as well. Maybe not to dominate the world, but at least to dominate the Indian Ocean region. Almost 95% of India's trade happens via sea. To the west, there is a hostile Pakistani navy. To the east, China is building ports in Myanmar and Bangladesh. So India needs a strong navy. In fact, defense officials are pushing for a 3rd aircraft carrier. It is tentatively called INS Vishal. If approved, it could take more than 10 years to make. The Navy's rationale is pretty simple. India needs 1 carrier for the eastern flank, 1 for the western flank, and a 3rd as a backup. But unlike the US or Imperial Britain, India has multiple considerations. For starters, cost. These carriers cost around 20,000 crore rupees. So developing countries must balance defense spending with welfare priorities. If only we had better neighbors. But as Theodore Roosevelt said, a good navy is not a provocation to war. It is the surest guarantee of peace. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.